You're good.
All right. Jane, will you please take the roll?
Sure. Mayor McEachran,
Here.
Councilor Tabor,
Here.
Councilor Cook,
Here.
and the city manager's here, and I'm here, Jane Freeney. Apologize for the mask and the weak voice. I'm a little under the weather.
Going down.
That was all right.
So, but I thought it was important to check in with you folks since it's the beginning of the session and to get some guidance about direction and what we might want to focus on, because there are so many bills this session, over 1,000. So what I've done first is sent you folks a copy of the September 20th minutes. I don't know if you had a chance to look at those.
We had a motion to approve the minutes of September 20th, 2024.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great. So what I've done, just in the interim, before this meeting, is to sign either in support or in opposition to some bills that we have legislative principles already adopted. So House Bill 97, it just supports state aid grant funding, and Portsmouth was reached out by NHMA to support that bill, so we registered in support of that. House Bill 197, which is the bill that keeps coming back annually about having the state pay 7.5% of the employer portion of retirements for teachers and fire and police. So we registered in support of that. Very likely, given the budget this session, that's probably not going to pass, but certainly we registered in support because of the downshifting issue that we have had and suffered as a result of the state not paying for retirement. Senate Bill 113, state funding for the homeless. I think that has been tabled since I've registered the city's support for that. House Bill 137, we support, there are several bills this session that support retaining excess swept, so that is one of them. We registered in support of that bill and registered in opposition to two bills that require municipalities with excess swept to remit it to the state. And that's House Bill 675 and House Bill 669. We also registered in support of House Bill 595. It's a bill that creates a coastal resiliency zone. There was a hearing on the 12th, and I believe Councilor Cook testified, so I'll turn it over to her to explain sort of what happened and what was going on at the hearing.
As far as I can tell, everyone who came to speak spoke in favor. Several of the co-sponsors were there to speak. So when I spoke, I just reiterated my support. I just noted the support of the City of Portsmouth, that the City of Portsmouth had registered in favor of it, and then I asked to speak in my personal capacity as a resident, and told them it would be incredibly helpful to have some mechanism to support individuals that are impacted by coastal flooding. And I will say, I did get a question in the end. It caught me a little bit off guard, and the question was a little, I want to say obnoxious, but yes, from a representative from Stratum who asked me specifically if we could manage this without targeting support for specific individuals. And I kind of thought that it was very pointed and odd, and I just said that that I have full faith in the city staff and elected officials to administer this fairly, but that we haven't had an opportunity to even look at it because this has not been an opportunity in the past. So we have no idea how this would be administered, because why would we even have those discussions yet? But I thought it was an odd question, to be honest. But it has bipartisan support.
Okay, good.
And there will be amendments. From what I can tell, the lead sponsor was there, and he talked about changing it from coastal resiliency zones to just resiliency zones. Because some of the co-sponsors that they've picked up are from the central part of the state and from up north who have flooding issues because of major storms.
Yeah.
Yes. So hopefully that gets more support. If there were any other objections, there were questions about the R-PACE program and how that would be funded, because Florida had a similar program, and so there were questions around whether or not this would be appropriate for New Hampshire. So I'll let them work out the details.
Well, thank you very much for that report. And we can watch that and see what happens in the House. And then when it crosses over, if it does, to the Senate, then I know that I spoke with our Planning and Sustainability Director, Peter Britz, and he has some statistics and such about the city. And so we discussed those, and we could do testimony, for the Senate, because we do have some data. So if you and the committee is interested in that, we can do that if this survives a House vote.
Okay.
And then I just, as we do at the beginning of all sessions, I put the legislative principles in to see if any of you want to propose new principles or amend the existing ones. We've had these for the last, I think, 3 years now, without any major changes to them. It's not something we will have to decide right now if you need some time to think about it, but it might be something to consider. Anything that you would propose for a new principle, we would just take that to the City Council for a vote, and then these principles would be amended by regular vote, not a public hearing, just an agenda item. So I raised that because we have a lot of principles which are very helpful, by the way. I mean, it really is very helpful for staff to know, what the direction of the council's wishes are on legislation. And now I'll segue to the hard part. They're very broad, and there's a lot happening. For instance, local authority and local control. There are so many bills this session on a lot of topics that I try to erode that. So I could spend all of my days, monitoring some of those. I did want to let the committee know we got a request from NHMA. I know we don't have a policy on right to know because people feel very differently, but we were asked to provide some data to the House Judiciary Committee on right to know. There's a bill that would amend the right to know from the word citizen to person, and presumably expand the folks who would be allowed to inquire and get records, and also the bill would require emailing the documents to the requester. So the committee had questions. There were some concerns about out-of-state businesses, AI, and sort of many of the committee members didn't really have a scope or understanding of how much time and how broad some requests are for right to know. So our staff attorney, Jennifer Smith, provided some information. And, we really can't tell about IT, and that's just not something that we get. And that out-of-state concern wasn't something that we really experienced that much as far as responding to right-to-know requests. We do have some, but, we deal with those as they come up on a regular basis. One of the things that's interesting is the whole issue of the breadth of a request. There's no way to tailor a request. The municipality doesn't have any means or ways to say, if you're requesting records from 1900 to 1970. But we often call folks and talk to them and, try to get a good understanding of what they want. But they could be quite broad and require a lot of staff hours. So she was able to give some examples of that. Again, we said we did not support or oppose any legislation on this, but the committee was looking for information, like what is right to know? How does it affect cities? One interesting fact was that one of our admin staff in legal spends about 90% of her time dealing with right-to-know requests. And a new staff attorney spends 75% of her time doing right-to-know requests. Many of them are from the police records. There's an awful lot of requests relative to police records and, pending cases and that sort of thing. And then, some of them are just really broad. So the only risk of emailing is two. One is sometimes the voluminous documents are that voluminous. So I don't know if there'd be issues relative, to sending that, and then, did we comply? I think we could deal with that. But one of the reasons why we have people come and pick up the records, which is how many municipalities do it now, is that you have quote-unquote skin in the game, right? The person that wants the records, if they're going to come and they're going to pick it up. With just an email back and forth, I think, the concerns of the committee were how broad is that going to be for municipalities, and what does that look like? So I think there's some amendments to that bill that have been made. I don't know if they've gone back to the committee, but that's just something we watch because we'll have to comply, obviously, with any changes in the law. But I wanted you to know that that was an interesting topic, and there's a lot of right-to-know bills this session.
Can I ask a quick question? So has there been any discussion at all about municipalities being spammed with right-to-know requests?
I think that was part of the concern of the committee, yeah.
Okay.
That whole question about AI and out of state and out of country, and yeah, so that was, again, I didn't watch the hearing, but I understood from NHMA that those were questions asked by the committee. They wanted to know, what does it look like? What are you seeing?
Okay.
And yeah, I think that's a concern, that anyone anywhere could just shoot an email and get the records if it's broadened from citizen to person.
I think somebody should highlight for them that the reason maybe we're not seeing those is because it's currently citizen,
Right,
not person.
yes.
So they might not get the evidence they're looking for here, but maybe they should look at other states' experiences
Yeah.
with this.
That's a good point.
So when you did the review, did you find egregious examples of sort of hundreds and hundreds of pages being asked for unnecessarily?
There are some, something like every email of the last 12 months between X and Y, every email between Y and G for, a year. And I think those, depending on who the fill in the blank is, they could generate a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of communication.
Right. But, those don't sound crazy onerous.
Well, we did find some information about, there are some that are quite voluminous and quite,
Well, I think that if there's as it currently stands now, it's probably limited on the fact that you must be a citizen to request this information, and that you must come in person to pick up the information.
Right.
So
That's-
if,
yes.
I don't know what the economic purpose would be for somebody to request large amounts of data from a municipality, but if there's, in terms of, what type of data we keep, if there's any PII in any of that data, and that could be used for, abilities to then kind of spoof and fish based on the information that is requested, like that's only going to be more hard to deal with as kind of, agentic or agent-based AI is increasing its ability to, hold conversations. So I guess this is something that seems like a solution in search of a problem. Like right now, we seem to be okay in terms of how we deal with right-to-know requests, being citizens of, at least the state, and having at least the skin in the game to come pick up this information, so we don't have a data farm that's being, pointed at us. Now, if that were to change and, we would have those problems, we could address them, but I don't necessarily see the reason to support any changes to make it easier to get what are, public records, but, also records that we'd like to know. We don't want to make it, I guess, so easy that there could be outside actors acting in a way to scrape the data from a municipality. I think we have some right to protect the data of a municipality from a standpoint of just massive dumps of that information to outside agents acting for unknown reasons.
Yeah, it makes sense to keep it citizens and keep it hard copy.
Just
That puts the
parenthetically,
brakes on.
I think we do respond to out-of-state requests, though. I think some towns are very narrow in their how they respond to right to know, but just for you folks to know, if an out-of-state requester requests stuff, we produce it, but then we do have a requirement that they come in and pick it up. So, but yeah, it can be obviously very time-consuming. And something to watch, because it does have an impact on, our staff, and, we have to adjust to whatever the law is, and we do, but it's just something you should just be aware of as the session moves forward. So, going on to other testimony on legislative issues of interest, the PUC utility rule rate, Councilor Tabor flagged House Bill 760, and I'll have him speak to that, but that has not yet been scheduled for a hearing at all, and I found that interesting. It's been assigned to Science and Technology.
Science and technology.
Yeah, but I'm watching that, and I just thought you might want to speak to generally about this whole problem with utility rates that's going on.
Well, I think this bill is to remedy a problem in PUC rules. So you get two parts to your utility bill. You get your transmission charges, which is Eversource in our case, and then your supply charges. The PUC wants the utilities to be able to buy 30% of their supply that they provide to everybody who just lets them be their default supply source on the spot market. And the PUC thinks that's going to create cheaper rates. But the utilities have said, well, if we have to go in and every 6 months buy the spot market, that's very volatile, and it could spike up if there's a lot of cold weather, if there's a shortage of natural gas for generation and things like that. So the utilities said, we want to, if we set a fixed rate for 6 months and this spot market prices shoot up, we want to be able to recover our losses, not just for the people who use us as their default supply, but for everybody. People who have solar panels, people who have direct energy, people who have community power. They would all be charged through the transmission rates to make the utility have no risk. So, that puts the utility in a no-lose situation. And pushes everything back onto the ratepayers, and especially the ratepayers who, aren't even Eversource's supply
Yeah.
customers. So, the Community Power Coalition has been very vocal about this. I think Cliff Belo, who was a PUC commissioner, was one of the first to cry foul on this. And I think it's very anti-competitive for the community power folks.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A bit? Yeah.
Right, and more than that, it's allowing private profit for the investor-owned utilities, but socializing losses. So hopefully it'll be an interesting test now that community power towns are getting close to half the ratepayers in New Hampshire.
Wow, I didn't know it was that much.
Yeah, if all of the towns in the queue for town meeting this year approve, they'll be close to half the
Wow.
ratepayers. So I think they're mobilizing, and be interesting to see how much political clout they could muster. But I think it's fundamentally anti-competitive and harmful to community power and really against the spirit of deregulation, which was to allow lots of competition for supply,
Yep.
which has worked.
So the bill that would come up is to mandate that they do 30% on the spot market, or to allow them to do 30%, up to 30% on the spot market outside of the 6-month.
The bill says that if you go into the spot market and you take a loss, you have to recover that loss from your supply customers, not anybody, not Community Power, not Direct Energy, nobody else. And it has to be recovered within a year. So it's ending the subsidizing of the losses through the whole customer base. You know, should we speak out against the PUC's rules? Those appear to be
That's
something
separate,
they're
right?
pretty far down the track. And their motivation is always, we want the cheapest rates for customers. So I'm not sure the utilities were wild about having to go into the spot market.
This might be
But I think their response was, well, yeah, we'll go into the spot market if you let us
recover our losses, and we
Yeah.
no loss to us.
spread the losses across everybody.
Well, I'll watch that House Bill 70, and we can register when it comes for hearing, which hasn't been scheduled yet. So I don't know if they're still working on it or what the situation is. I think the crossover is in March, early March, so I'll keep an eye out on that one.
It'd be positive, just it would rein in the PUC a little bit. And I think that's the goal.
Yeah. And it's interesting, it's got Osborne and Waters. It's sort of bipartisan.
Interesting. And then housing. I know the last meeting we had, we talked about, how some of our policies seem to be inconsistent. The support workforce housing policy we have on legislation, but the maintaining local control and particularly of the zoning ordinance. So what I did is I took 22 bills that relate to housing, and I spoke with our Director of Planning and Sustainability to see if these bills are in line with sort of the direction of the city, and there were several that would be statewide zoning changes, quote unquote, that seem to be within the direction of the city. So I will list them briefly for you, and then if you agree, then I can register, in support for some of these housing bills that the planning director has reviewed, as they may or may not affect our path forward for future zoning amendments. So House Bill 342 is a bill that allows property owners to build on their property without seeking a variance for minimum lot size or lot coverage if the proposed building density conforms to that of the surrounding neighborhood. And that is an interesting one that could, save administrative time, certainly, right, when those things would be not require variances. And it's the one point that the planning director said, it appears that the setbacks would still apply, which he felt would be very important, but he did not see the city's support of that, even though we have that balancing test between local control as something that wouldn't be interesting for the city to move towards. The next bill is House Bill 457, and that prohibits municipalities from adopting an ordinance that restricts the number of occupants of any dwelling unit to less than 2 occupants per bedroom. That has a meeting on the 18th, and the planning director's comments for that bill was that might work to expand workforce housing or perhaps enable shared housing. So he had no, objections or concerns about that. So that's something that we could register in support of. The third bill is House Bill 572, which creates the Partners in Housing Program, and that's a low-interest loan and grant program under the Housing Champion Fund to, assist towns and counties and developers in building modest-priced houses. There was already a hearing on that. A work session is likely to be scheduled on that. Again, creating low-market housing is something that, and funds to do that is something that the city would support. The fourth is House Bill 577, and that expands accessory dwelling units by right to include detached units, adding definitions related to accessory dwelling units, and increasing the maximum square footage. And again, expanding the support of accessory dwelling units is something that the planning director supported as well. And the last one is House Bill 604, and that's relative to a loan forgiveness program for low-income homeowners to build accessory dwellings and renovate existing structures into accessory dwelling. Again, same thing, supporting the ability to have, more support for homeowners to have accessory dwellings and help with that. So and this is why I wanted guidance from you folks, because it is statewide zoning, so that's against one of our policies, but these are bills that would hopefully expand access to workforce housing. So if this committee supports the city supporting these bills, then I can register and support. I didn't want to do so because we have, without checking with you folks first, because I didn't want to. We have somewhat conflicting legislative policies.
No, there's nothing that doesn't align with what we're trying to do in the Housing Committee.
Great, okay.
In fact, they're all helpful.
So should we just do a motion or?
Yeah, I would move that we.
To support? Yep.
Sure. I move that we support the bills as mentioned.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Yeah.
opposed?
Thank you. That's helpful to me, It gives me guidance, and that's probably one of the reasons why I wanted to meet with you folks. That helps me clarify, what I can pursue.
Yeah, I think it's always a balance in terms of what the state is, and I mean a balance in terms of Portsmouth is leading a lot of these things and gives credibility to speak to other municipalities. It's also just difficult. We balance the right of local control and hold that as a fundamental right of any community, but we are at a crisis level where the lack of action by other parts of the state is having a very strong impact on us, and so there's not a point where our ability to have local control over other aspects is now being eroded by the fact that a majority of the state is not really stepping up at all to meet the housing needs. And so I want to be as thoughtful of how do we create the right types of incentives, because I think it's going to be incentive-based that gets, the right type of housing. And I look for, from an education funding standpoint, that to be aligned in some way going forward. But if the rest of the state is unwilling to meet at least a modicum of new housing, then it's going to be difficult for us to have the local control that we, not just from a state, but just from the control of our municipality from a housing cost standpoint. We are bearing the brunt of others' decisions that don't allow us the local control that we would like to have, with regard to, the housing prices that we're experiencing. So local control is a principle. It's one that we support. I think that as we face larger impacts from a lack of affordability, specifically in New England and here in New Hampshire, we need to, make it known that, our ability to control our destiny is being impinged upon the lack of action on the state level to do that. And at least that's how I reconcile those opposing views in my head, that, if there was something that, I'd be surprised to find the bill that we would find that we wouldn't support, because of the need for this. And so, maybe at a future meeting, we can take a stronger declaratory action when it comes to, how we measure those opposing views. But supporting all the bills that we currently have in front of us are, certainly a first step. Councilor Cook?
I had a particular question around House Bill 631, because we got a legislative alert from the New Hampshire Municipal Association asking us where we stood on it. And House Bill 631 is the bill that mandates multifamily or mixed-use developments as permitted use by right in certain urban municipalities. I believe we would qualify as one of those. Specifically in areas zoned for commercial, office, retail, or parking uses.
Yes, actually, Peter Britz did comment on that one,
Okay.
too, in very general terms. His note said it is a progressive idea as far as zoning overall, but could harm historic characters of some communities. In New Hampshire, it would result in more housing density and taller buildings in most communities than are currently found there. So,
Right.
again, it's that balancing, that balancing. So when looking at those bills, he had those concerns, so I didn't bring it forward for the vote on housing.
Right. I looked at it and I thought, I think that Portsmouth probably would support this generally, but there's some challenges around only allowing 20% of ground space to be dedicated to retail. And the 65-foot height requirement, when I think our limit is 60 in the
Yes.
city, specifically in the downtown district. So that to me were those were the two conflicts that we have currently with it, but I didn't know if anyone had reached out, or any of our delegation had reached out for potential amendments there.
No.
Specifically for downtown districts, because you wouldn't just allow 20% retail on a first floor in a downtown. So that would impact negatively Manchester, Concord, anybody who has a downtown district, I would think.
I can look and see where that is in the pipeline. If it crosses over, then maybe that, and with the Senate and with Senator Perkins Coker, who is a housing advocate, we could speak to her about that if it makes it out of the House.
Right.
That might be a good way to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, it might just be a discussion around, logically this works, but it doesn't work in absolutely every commercial district.
Right. And I'll also reach back out to Peter Britz to see what his comments could be. If we look at it a little bit more, he might be helpful in suggesting language.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And we talked about ed funding. The testimony of the CC2 is posted to the legislative subcommittee. I'm also going to do a list of these bills that we've registered in support, the bills in the subsection 3 of our agenda, just so there's some, note on our website. We've updated NHMA's current principles as well. That I was neglectful, and we had old ones up there, so we fixed that. And there will probably be more ed funding from the coalition communities, written testimony, so I'll upload that. We talked about the coastal resiliency and then the downshifting of costs from the state to municipalities. I think Nathan Looney is on the line, and I think he spoke to the council a little bit at the last meeting about some of those issues that may arise as far as the budget and what we typically get from the state. So I don't know if he's able to join. And
He is on, and he will unmute, I think.
While we're waiting for Nathan, the amount of revenue that the state is getting is cratering. And, the capital gains tax being removed, I think we still get money until April around that, but that goes away. That was a big, pot of cash. The other thing that's very concerning is the business profits tax.
Yes.
They reduced that, but it appears as though the projections included ARPA money. So ARPA money leaving the the state, both from a direct payment to the government, or the state. It also was being counted as money that was as a part of the business profits tax. So without, that, we are now, I think, and it's always odd in terms of when it does come in, but we're 41% off of plan through January, which is a significant amount of money to make up. From what I've heard, the impacts of this are not, from a downshifting of costs, the room and meals revenue, which we saw an uptick, although very small, could be removed and taken back to the state. And there's a strong concern, at least from what I've heard in terms of the budget, is we might have some zoning things around this, but everything else is trying to fix a broken budget.
And federal, whatever federal stuff is coming down is going to be cut, so.
Jane, when we shift back to education, Nathan was trying to join, so reminder of what you want Nathan to speak about.
Well, just, he had mentioned at the last city council meeting some funds he thought might be at risk for not being funded, or our potential loss. And I just didn't know if he, had any expansion on that, or just wanted to reiterate that that is a real thing, that just like what the mayor said, basically, if he has that information.
Yep, he's here now. Thanks, Nathan.
Good morning, folks.
Morning.
I would, I guess, echo the comments the other night. Maybe I could offer some clarity that the number that I used was roughly $3 million. The truth is, depending on what executive orders are actualized in the long term, and what impacts, what departments are impacted, et cetera. I mean, then the number in terms of our federal support is much greater than $3 million year over year. Right now, the staff were able to identify, and I called them out, the Community Development Block Grant and the ICAC funds for the Internet Crime Against Children. Those are dollars right now that we would be using, requesting, being reimbursed for. Additionally, there were dollars from the police department coming from the federal level to support bulletproof vests, investigative equipment, staff training, some equipment for the Seacoast Emergency Response Team. So a number of dollars that are at risk right now, but that's really just a fraction of the dollars that we pick up. In one of your resolutions every year at budget time, after we deal with general fund and water and sewer, we deal with special revenues. So a lot of those special funds fall in the special revenue category, and we can put a number on that eventually. But I wanted to make sure that folks understood the risk was real, and we were monitoring what's coming out of UC, certainly. But we're not the only ones sharing in that angst. The state and federal agencies communicated very quickly with many of our department leaders to talk about those funds and the rest. So we feel like we have decent channels of communication. We'll be able to update you as any of those impacts become clear, especially as they maybe become lasting.
Thanks, Nathan.
So it's a wait and see, I guess, on that potential downshifting. And that was all that I had. Thanks for the guidance on some of the housing bills. I think I would echo the mayor's concern about the budget. That's going to really dictate anything. And so a lot of the things that we support, like the 7.5, the state paying for the employee portion for our employers, that, I doubt that's going to pass. But, we watch, we monitor, we register our support. We don't stop, but I think this year is going to be a challenging one, this session in particular. So thanks for the guidance. If anyone has any more
Would it be helpful
issues?
to have some guidance in the form of a motion on HB 760? I kind of let that
Sure.
moment pass.
Of course.
Sorry, which one is HB?
760.
That's the utility.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll move that we advocate for HB 760.
Second.
any further discussion on that? Seems like a market approach. And yeah, it's hard to imagine that, they're not required to do anything. And so, if they believe that they're going to get losses, they, shouldn't be in that business. And so, whereas the other, group, Community Power, is in that business and wants to be more actively managing and is willing to, take the risk and not socialize the loss there, so.
Yeah, and as we talked about Wednesday night at PIAC, we just had a contract that fell through and had to add an increment to the rate. Wouldn't it be nice if we could go to all of Eversource's customers to recover?
Well, I continue to think that Eversource, I hope that they focus on investing in transmission and the things that we will all require as a state, especially as electrical demands grow, and to pass those charges back as required, and get in that business, because we definitely need a lot more transmission than we currently have if we're going to electrify, and to, maybe not fight, all of the competitors in terms of the opportunity for different sources and different rates, of energy, knowing that there's a huge opportunity to invest in the transmission of electricity to lower our costs, long term. We still all pay that, and we're going to need to pay it a lot more. But all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Unanimous.
I know that Jane's doing God's work here, showing up, feeling under the weather. We should have another meeting to get the feedback from, potentially with our delegation, to get the
Okay.
feeling of this, hopefully before all of the crossover happens, but we'd like to get that, especially, given the budget implications, for the city of Portsmouth. We'd like to have that conversation. And for those that don't follow and go up to Concord, and, would love that to be an opportunity for the delegation to share with us and the community that's engaged, what's going on in Concord. But we'll work with Jane to figure out a time that works for the delegation and for city staff, but I'll wait a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.